That night, a seemingly ordinary Tuesday night, turned into the most insane yet exhilarating experience of my entire life. It began with an eerie calmness, so tranquil it lulled me into a false sense of profound safety. But it was precisely in that fleeting moment of unguarded peace that the unimaginable struck, shattering everything I thought I knew. For 8 years, it was just me and Noah. Ever since the day I signed the divorce papers and left behind a life I once thought was unbreakable, my son had been my world, and I his. We didn't have much, but we had each other. A tiny apartment with second-hand furniture, late-night talks over homework, and quiet moments over breakfast when everything felt still. Noah wasn't like other boys his age. At just 20, he had a way of carrying himself that often made people do a double take. He noticed things most kids wouldn't, the way I rubbed my temples when I was stressed, or how I lingered too long over the grocery list, trying to stretch every dollar. "I'm fine," I'd tell him, forcing a smile. He'd nod, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was always so thoughtful. Too thoughtful. He'd offer to do chores without being asked, leave sweet notes on the fridge, or stay up late trying to fix something around the house. On weekends, we'd explore flea markets together, making a game out of finding treasures amidst the junk. Those were our moments when, for a little while, we could forget about everything else. But suddenly one day, everything seemed to change. This change made me realize. My son had undergone silent changes that I had not known about. The actions and gestures that I had long thought were simple actions of a son towards his mother had a different meaning. I can't forget the feeling of his hand in mine, the way his touch lingered against my skin. On the surface, it seemed so small, so innocent, yet it carried a depth I couldn't ignore. Each brush of his fingers spoke volumes, whispering truths neither of us dared to voice. And as time passed, I began to realize something undeniable I didn't want to forget. The bond between us felt unshakable, an invisible thread pulling us closer with every passing day. It wasn't just in the moments we shared, but in the quiet spaces in between, where the echoes of his presence lingered like a gentle melody in my mind. Every glance, every accidental touch, every shared silence added another layer to the connection we couldn't deny. And yet, it wasn't just me. I could see it in Noah too, in the way his gaze softened when he thought I wasn't looking, how his eyes seemed to linger a moment too long. He carried an unspoken weight in his expression, a mix of uncertainty and yearning that mirrored my own. It was in the way he always seemed to find excuses to be near me, a question about something mundane, a task he suddenly needed help with. Each excuse felt like a thread, weaving us closer together, even if neither of us admitted it aloud. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the room in hues of amber and gold, I noticed it again. He sat across from me, his fingers lightly tracing the edge of a cup, his gaze flickering toward me before darting away, as though he couldn't decide whether to hold my eyes or hide his thoughts. I felt my heart quicken, an ache that was both thrilling and terrifying. How had we come to this place? How had something so ordinary become so profound? The air between us was charged, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. When he finally looked at me, truly looked, it was as if the world narrowed to just the two of us. For a moment, there were no doubts, no fears, only the quiet, unspoken truth of what we both knew but couldn't yet say. The connection between us wasn't just real, it was inescapable. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to run from it. Instead, I sat there, letting the moment wash over me, knowing that whatever came next, it was already written in the spaces between us. That day was really tiring for me. I barely had any energy left after dinner. I decided to go to bed early while Noah played video games and did his homework in his room. Alone in the dark room, except for the faint light from the moon shining through the thin curtains. I pulled the covers and sank into the warmth and comfort of the bed. I smiled slightly when I thought about Noah. He has a big heart, and I am lucky to have him in my life. But today, because I was so tired, my eyes were heavy. The soft bed helped my tired body relax. I was ready to give up on sleep. But when I had just closed my eyes for a while, I suddenly heard a knock on the door. I opened my eyes half awake and half asleep. The knocking sound again pulled me out of my dream. I blinked, trying to focus on the light at the door. It's Noah. What's he looking for me for at this hour? I thought to myself. I leaned on my elbows and asked, "What's wrong?" Noah hesitated for a moment before closing the door gently. There was something making him move very cautiously, as if he wasn't sure if he should be here or not. "I can't sleep," he said softly, his eyes looking away as if avoiding my gaze. It had been a long time since those early months after my wife and I divorced. Noah had often had trouble sleeping. Noah and I had worked hard to get through that time together. Although Noah never said it, I knew he was struggling with the changes in his life. The absence of his father during the important years of his life had affected him a lot. "Come here," I gently patted the space next to me. "You can sleep here tonight." Noah hesitated for a moment before coming over and crawling into bed next to me. He lay on his side facing me. It was the first time in years that Noah had seen him up close. But something had changed. Something else flashed behind Noah's eyes. He looked at me for a long time. His gaze seemed different. I needed to do something to break the tension that seemed unbearable. I moved closer, wrapping my arms around him. It had been so long since we had been this close. It had been so long since Noah had come to me for comfort the way he had when he was a child. I reached out to stroke his hair back and smiled softly. He said nothing. I held his head close to my chest. His breathing suddenly quickened. Noah's eyes widened a little, but he didn't move away. My heart was pounding in my chest as I reached out, my hand shaking as I gently touched his cheek. Noah smiled back, but there was something else behind that look. I didn't push him away, but pulled the blanket over both of us. Silence fell around us. We just lay there, silently next to each other. Noah's breathing began to slow down, becoming deep and steady. I thought Noah had fallen asleep, but then in a voice that was almost inaudible, Noah said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't keep this inside anymore." His words took me by surprise. "What's wrong, Noah?" I asked. My question was answered by silence. Suddenly, the boy raised his head, his lips touching mine. The light touch of their lips startled me. I pushed him away without thinking. I was stunned for a moment. My mind was dizzy. What was happening? Was it a tentative kiss from the boy? It was soft, questioning, filled with longing and guilt. It has been a long time since I broke up with my ex-husband. I have not had any more relationships with any men. I am afraid that those men will not be able to treat my son well. The desires of a woman were also buried by me during that time. The fire of love seemed to have been extinguished by me just to spend all my time and mind taking care of Noah. There were nights when I lay in bed tossing and turning. But when dawn came, facing a new day, I told myself that I could overcome everything. It has been a long time since I have received the care and love of any man, even though many people around me have offered to take care of me and Noah. But fear made me constantly say no. To me, Noah is all I have. Noah and I have been in a circle of just the two of us for a very, very long time. Suddenly Noah said, "I'm sorry." Once again, I could not resist my love for Noah. I did not push Noah away. Once again, I took the initiative to hug him. This hug made me think and restless. It seemed like something was changing inside me. A feeling that I could not name exactly. A feeling just below the surface, just waiting for me to name and admit. It seemed like something was changing between us, and I was not sure if I was ready for it. Noah also hugged me back. The strong arms of a young man, the masculine scent emanating from his body made me lose myself. It seemed like there was a smoldering fire burning inside me. We lay in each other's arms like that until morning. The next morning came faster than I thought. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, waking me up. Before I was ready to face the new day, Noah was still sleeping soundly beside me, his face exuding peace. His breathing was gentle and even. His lips were full, faintly fragrant. I was startled and shook my head vigorously. A strange feeling arose again. I tried to push it away and quietly slipped out of bed. I didn't want to wake Noah and quickly went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. I was absorbed in preparing breakfast without realizing Noah's presence until I was startled to see him leaning against the wall watching me cook. His eyes were filled with passion and infatuation. When our eyes met, he was also startled and confused. "Good morning, Mom." He moved closer and reached for the cup to make coffee. Unable to avoid him, I stood still close to Noah's strong body. My heart suddenly started pounding. The boy stopped, refusing to move. "What is it?" I asked. His eyes were fixed on me. "I'm hungry, Mom," he replied. But again he didn't move. Instead he stood there, looking down at me. I stood there awkwardly. "The cake is almost done." As I turned to take it out, Noah suddenly grabbed me, leaned down, and pressed his lips to mine. The warmth of his lips sent a shiver down my spine, leaving me speechless. A feeling of guilt welled up, but so did wild longing. I knew I had to find a way to stop these feelings to protect my family from the chaos that was about to happen. But the reality of my situation became painfully clear. I had forbidden desires. For a moment I thought about pushing Noah away, but incredibly, my reason couldn't overcome the emotions that were surging inside me. At first I hesitated, but quickly became determined. I returned Noah's lips. The kiss deepened, our tongues exploring each other in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. I could feel Noah's hands on my chest, clutching my shirt, unsure if he wanted to pull me closer or push me away. When we broke the kiss, I looked into Noah's eyes, wide and conflicted. "Noah, we can't do this." "It's wrong," I whispered, but his body remained close to mine, betraying my words. "I know, Mom, but I can't help but feel this way," Noah said, his voice desperate. Noah kissed me again, harder this time, and I felt my resistance melt away. My arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, and I knew I had succumbed to the forbidden desires that had tormented me. Our kiss became more passionate, more urgent. Noah lifted me up, and I instinctively wrapped my legs around his waist. Carrying me to the counter, Noah set me down, our lips never parting. Noah's hands roamed my body, feeling the curves of my body. We explored each other, peeling off layers of clothing to reveal skin that was begging to be touched. The flickering kitchen lights above us cast dancing shadows over our entwined bodies. My breath hitched, a mix of fear and anticipation in Noah's eyes as he looked at me. "This is crazy," I whispered, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. We entwined, continuing to explore each other with feverish intensity, my fingers tangling in Noah's flowing hair. Noah's arms pulled me closer as our kisses became more desperate. I could feel the warmth of his body against mine. His firm chest, the layers of muscle rolling, intoxicating. We didn't need to say anything. I knew what Noah wanted and what we both craved despite the forbidden nature of our desires. Noah positioned himself at the entrance, his eyes on me as he prepared to cross the final line. Our eyes met for a moment. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was intense. We moved together, slowly, adjusting to the new sensations, then faster as our passion reached its peak. The sounds, our mingled breathing, and the soft sounds of skin touching filled the room. It was as if something had built between us after that morning. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. No, it was not mistaken for love. It was simply the love that had grown naturally between us. The kind that blossomed after years of caring and trust. When it was all over, we were there slowly realizing what had just happened. Noah smiled at me with eyes full of warmth. "Are we okay?" I nodded because I couldn't speak for a moment. My heart was too full and overwhelmed by everything I was feeling. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of unspoken emotions between us seemed to dissolve, replaced by a rare, profound calmness. It was the kind of peace that didn't need words or gestures to prove its existence. Just being there, together, was enough. We sat side by side, enveloped by the gentle embrace of the night. There wasn't much to say, but we didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was filled with understanding, a quiet companionship that spoke louder than words ever could. The night had a stillness to it, different from anything I'd experienced before, as if the world itself was pausing to listen to the shared rhythm of our hearts. There was no rush, no pressure. Whatever was unfolding between us seemed to have found its own pace, slow yet deliberate. Noah reached out unexpectedly and took my hand. The warmth of his fingers against mine sent a soft, steady pulse through my body, like a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. I turned to look at him, and in his eyes, I saw a tenderness that made me feel more valued than I'd ever known. I smiled, gently squeezing his hand in return, silently letting him know that I felt it too. This connection, this quiet reassurance, this unspoken understanding that we were on the same path. We stayed like that, hand in hand, savoring the kind of silence that felt anything but empty. It was comforting, natural, as though words would only disrupt the fragile beauty of the moment. Above us, the stars shimmered in the vast expanse of the sky, as if they were witnesses to the quiet shift taking place between us. In that moment, I realized the sense of calm wasn't an end. It was a journey. A journey I was more than willing to take, without hurry or hesitation, as long as Noah was beside me. That night, I didn't need answers about where we were headed. All I knew was that something had begun, and for now, that was more than enough. As I sat there next to Noah, our hands entwined beneath the soft embrace of the night sky, I felt a quiet certainty settle within me. Whatever lay ahead, whatever challenges or uncertainties awaited us, I knew we would face them together. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the warmth of his hand in mine, the stars above, and the unspoken promise between us. In the days that followed, this quiet intimacy became a rhythm we naturally fell into, a part of our lives as seamless as breathing. We didn't talk about it much. There was no need to. What was growing between us defied the need for labels. It wasn't something we could neatly define or categorize. It simply was. It existed in the way his eyes lingered on mine a moment longer than necessary, in the way our hands brushed against each other as if by accident, but lingered just a little too long to be unintentional. Every glance, every fleeting touch carried a weight of unspoken understanding, as if we were learning to communicate in a language that only we could comprehend. The connection flowed between us naturally, weaving itself into the fabric of our daily lives. It was there in the way he would lean closer when I spoke, as though my voice held secrets he couldn't bear to miss. It was in the way we shared the quiet moments, those rare pockets of time stolen from the chaos of the world, where words became unnecessary and the silence itself felt sacred. These moments weren't grand or dramatic. They were small, almost imperceptible, but they held a power that was undeniable. Sitting on the couch, our shoulders barely touching, watching a movie neither of us could fully follow because we were too aware of each other. Standing in the kitchen, our hands accidentally brushing as we passed plates, and the electricity of that fleeting contact lingering long after. The way he would find excuses to be near me, and how I would do the same without realizing it. With each passing day, I felt the bond between us deepen, becoming more tangible, more real. It wasn't something we could ignore, even if we wanted to, and I didn't. At first, I had wrestled with the implications, with the silent question of whether this was right, whether it made sense. But as the days turned into weeks, those doubts melted away. The connection we shared felt too genuine, too profound to deny. There was a simplicity to it that I cherished. We didn't need to explain ourselves to anyone else. This was ours, private and untainted by the outside world. In those quiet hours, when it was just the two of us, I could feel the weight of everything that had once held me back lift, replaced by a peace I hadn't known I was searching for. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Noah reached for my hand again. This time, it wasn't tentative or hesitant. It was steady, deliberate. His fingers intertwined with mine as if they belonged there. I turned to him, meeting his gaze, and in that moment, I saw everything. The unspoken feelings, the quiet assurances, the promise of something neither of us had dared to name, but had felt all along. I smiled, a soft, unguarded smile that I knew was mirrored in his eyes. There were no words to be said, and none were needed. The silence between us was alive with emotion, a living testament to everything we couldn't yet voice. As the stars began to appear, one by one, above us, I realized something that had been slowly taking shape in my heart. Whatever this was, whatever it might become, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. It wasn't something to be feared or analyzed. It was something to be cherished. We didn't need to rush, didn't need to push for answers or resolutions. This connection, This growing intimacy had its own pace, and I was content to let it unfold naturally. With Noah beside me, I felt a sense of clarity and certainty I hadn't thought possible. And so we sat there, hand in hand, sharing the quiet beauty of the moment as the night wrapped us in its gentle embrace. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about what it might hold. All that mattered was the here and now and the undeniable truth that whatever came next, we would face it together.